Anyone who sees this assassination of Charlie Kirk as some scandal, mafioso, another hate scene that just occurred in the United States of America is being a little bit short-sighted, if I could even say a little bit childish and immature. There's obviously much bigger sign here that is being exposed to us, and like I said, if it wasn't for that, you don't need me to be here. There are plenty of political figures that went ahead and spoke about this subject. I want to bring out one important lesson, idea, concept that we should be learning about what is going on in the Western world in general and how such an assassination could occur. Where did it come from? And that is a very straightforward idea that we know that modern society in our day and age breeds and discusses and cries the idea of freedom. All the charters and the constitutions that we are familiar with of all type of democracies are there to enshrine the idea of freedom in every possible way. Any value, and the highest type of value that we understand, is always the right to express oneself, to be fully unhindered in what I want to say. The highest form of the American Constitution, the biggest idea behind it is, of course, we are quite familiar with the Bill of Rights. That is what is expressed as the highest code of all the societies, and to unfailingly focus on one's rights and one's personal needs, what he believes in. If I decide that something is true, then it's true. Even though you might decide something completely the opposite, but that's also true. Because there is no contradiction per se between two truths, in as much as we both believe in them. And as much as we both feel that that is what is correct, then apparently there are two truths. Happens to be they contradict one to the other, but it's not necessarily a contradiction because, look, we both feel them. That's the whole idea of the democratic, capitalistic type of feeling of freedom. That what I feel is the freedom of speech. When you look into the Torah demands of what it discusses of us, it never speaks about necessarily loyalty. It never speaks about the idea of freedom. It only discusses the idea of loyalty, allegiance, obligation. And in some people that looks like putting a noose around my neck. It's too tight. It's telling me what I need to do. It doesn't give me any freedom. It turns me a slave to another, to somewhere else. But the truth is, if a person really faces the emet, as I want to just explain over here, the only way that a person reaches true freedom is if he is a slave to the truth. If a person focuses on what is real, what we call in Hebrew emet, where we focus on the truth, there is only one truth, there are no two truths. An autonomy of the word, the etymology of the word emet is aleph mem tet, which means there's only one of them. It's perfectly spaced. Aleph is one, tuf is the last letter, and mem is smack in the middle. You can't have two emets. There's only one because it's perfect. Sheker is the word sheker, shin, kufresh are all grouped together as one. That you have an endless amount of possibilities of that type of combination. When a person is doing a math problem, in the end of the day, there's an endless amount of wrong answers, but there's only one proper answer, which we would call the truth. Truth is something that comes, if I could say, divine, something that is in unity, that there's only one of those truths and not two of them. The second I decide that whatever I decide is the truth, what you're really deciding is what my ego is expressing. I should be in control of what my obligations are, and it's really just a thin veil over what my true ego is all about. It's a focus about who, me, myself, and I, and nobody really else. It's really much more of a motivation, which that whole motivation is about what's in it for me. Let me tell you an important idea which should be obvious to all, but in every relationship between two people, between a worker and his boss, or between a society and its citizens and its government, in every type of relationship there is always a give and a take, a tit for tat. There's always a back and a forth between the two of them. And never the two shall part. You need to always have a giving and a taking in both directions, hopefully, but that's how it is. But there's a very big difference between where the focus is. How am I focused? In the holiday of Purim, which is the holiday where we all get dressed up and we go and do what we call Mishloach Manot, we go around from house to house, seems to be synonymous with what they copied from us, the Christians, of a holiday that they call Halloween, which also is dressing up and going from door to door. The slight difference between them is that in our holiday, the mitzvah, the obligation, is to go and give. It's to go out and do something for someone else. And it happens to be, you go ahead and take the mishloach manot, you're obligated to do that. As opposed to in Halloween, it's an idea of trick or treat. You go to people's houses and you request from them. And if not, then you might get a trick. But al kol panim, there's both a back and forth. There's back a recipient and a deliverer. The question is, where's the focus? What we call in Hebrew, what's the dagesh? Where am I looking at? Am I busy focusing on what I will receive, or am I busy focusing on what I can give to another person? In the Torah, there is no place where it discusses rights. It more only talks about my personal obligations. Of course, when I have an obligation, then you have your rights in my obligations. But it's not a contradiction, because the focus is where I point my finger. Is my finger pointed on myself, on what I am obligated to do, or is my finger pointed on what you are obligated to do for me? That's what we call my rights, or the Bill of Rights. That's what we talk about when you focus. It's all a matter of the direction. It's all a matter of a frame of mind. My right to my property can be expressed, obviously, as your obligation not to steal. That's obviously true. But where am I looking at? Read the 10 Commandments. Lo tignov, lo tirtzach, lo tinov. It's all about what you cannot do. Don't do this, don't do that, don't steal, don't kill, and also don't commit adultery, etc., etc. You're not allowed to be doing other things to other people, which means that they have obviously the right to proclaim it upon you. But if you focus on what the constitutional rights is all about, then it's my rights are due to me. I can demand them if necessary. They're mine. It's all about my rights. Your obligations are there to do for me. You better be careful about where you step on my shoes. People, if I could say, growing up in America, are very polite and nice, and I love it. It's great. It's a fantastic thing. But if you rub shoulders in the wrong way just a little bit, then you are going to get it over the head. You'll get sued from here till tomorrow. It's the suing capital of the world. It's an incredible thing. I remember my son one time was in a mall, and he was four years old, and we couldn't find him, and then I saw him 2 floors down. So I had to run down the escalator to try as fast as I can to get him, because I was very nervous. I was here in the United States. I was very nervous about what could be. And on the way, I brushed up against someone on the escalator saying, "Excuse me, sir, I have to run. He gave me such I can't even begin to tell you what type of curses he was telling me that. I brushed up against him. Do you know, you're brushing up against it. It's all about myself. It's all about my force field around me, of what it takes for my approach that I grew up with. Unfortunately, that is how we end up raising our children if we raise them up with this idea. The Torah way of raising a child is to teach him what your responsibilities are. Where is your obligations? What do you have to do for other people? Not in a decrepit and depressing way, that's not the intention, but in a way of responsibility. To know that I have to know that not everything I want to do, I can do. Not everything I want to say, I can say. I have limitations in life. Yes, there is a divine source above me that tells me when I can do things and when I can't. And if a person is really mechapes the emet, for those people, and I've seen it with my own eyes, who are searching from the truth, they end up finding the truth. They end up speaking the truth. The problem is sometimes they get shot for it. And you know why they get shot? I'll tell you why. Because the person shooting has no boundaries. He has no borders. He was never raised with borders. There was no quandaries about doing it. I assure you, when they catch this guy, he's not going to feel guilty. He's going to be upset. Maybe he should be put on the chair. Maybe he's going to be upset that he's going to be put in jail for life. That might be a little bit depressing, but he won't have any qualms or quirks about what he's doing. That was a rhyme with Kirk. He's not going to feel bad about it. You know why? Because he was raised. Because if I feel this way, you are hindering my position. You are stating to the world, to giving over to millions of people, in position, an idea, a concept, an ideology which I disagree with. And therefore, you have to be put away. You're not there in place. The person doesn't have any boundaries. His boundaries of what he calls truth, of what he calls emet, is what I believe. It's a type of truth which is plastic, which can be changed, which is absorbed according to each individual's purpose. I have to say, maybe it's not a nice mashal, and I know people use these expressions sometimes, but there's no real big difference between what this guy did a couple days ago and what the Yamach Shema, what Hitler did to 6 million Jews. This was one person, that was 6 million. But they both came from an ideology of the same type of idea. Hitler also felt that all Jews deserve to die, and they're only destroying the world. And if you read his book, Mein Kampf, you will see that it all came from a theory of a madman, of course, but that decided that these people are destroying the universe. And the Darwinism way to do is survival of the fittest and finish them off. So from his position, he's correct. From this guy's position, he's correct. Everybody's correct. When you live with a leftist society, when you live with a complete democratic way of thinking to its extreme, and it didn't start like this. We know that the men who started the United States of America, or the Western way of thinking, were great men. They were tremendous thinkers, George Washington, Lincoln, and all the others. They were obviously people with a tremendous mind. They would have never dreamt it would get to here. But you don't understand, when you don't teach people boundaries, when you don't teach people that there's a higher source that's telling you what to do, when you don't tell people there's an emet, there's one emet and there's one obligation, and you are obligated to serve the other person, then the left turn into what they look like right now. This is not just in society. Of course, that's where we see it blatantly. It's in everything in life. What about marriage? Every marriage is made up of a give and a take. Both sides are supposed to reciprocate one to the next. That's what it's all about. But if you go into a marriage with the focus about her and what she is obligated to do for me, then you should know that you're bound to divorce sooner than later, and the sooner is much more than the later. As opposed to when a person takes the finger and points it at himself, what are my obligations here? As the Ketuvah, the marriage contract, writes, what am I obligated in this marriage? What can I do for you? How can I service you to make you a happy person? Ta'aminu li, believe in me and trust me, those are the marriages that last. And it's not just that they last, they are living in willful bliss. They are living in Gan Eden. They live to the late ages of the day, but unfortunately, this doesn't exist as much as it used to. Because this ideal relationship comes from the fact that I'm focused on the you as opposed to the me, even though in the end of the day I will be receiving things also, and I also am going to end up taking, but the focus is everything. In the world of the employee and the employer, when we're busy focusing on the other guy, my obligations, what I can do for him, as the Torah ascribes many of those obligations, so you should know the relationship will be incredible. As opposed to what we are raised with, obviously, with the idea of my personal rights, and you can't do this to me, do this, so suddenly a union is created. All the employees get together, and all the employees get together. One makes a national association like this, one makes a union, there are strikes, everything goes on hold, and the battle of the giants go one to the next. This is an incredible idea, a concept which should be obvious and simple to all of us. I'm not creating anything. I think this bullet that we saw this week has just expressed the idea. It came to show us that yes, when I live in a progressive society, that anything goes, any gender I want to be, any way I want to think wants to do, and religion is zero. And I'm not coming here only to express religion, even though that's obviously what I mean. But the idea is that therefore the next step is over the cliff. You cannot stop it. The next generation will go farther and farther. If over here it's just one bullet to one person, it will get much worse later. People said to me that, America's on the verge of a civil war. There's going to be a tremendous amount of disagreements and spite between the two, and there's going to be a lot of fights because of what happened. And I told them, and I'm telling you, I'm not a prophet and not at all type of prophet, there will be no civil war. There will be no type of, this will blow over in a month or two and nothing will happen. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if a person from the right would shoot a person from the left, would shoot one of these progressive, then you'll get a civil war. Then everybody will start burning things down, there'll be fights, people get the guns out, and things will turn into the Wild West. Because they don't have any borders. They're not raised with borders. These are the children of the progressive. These are the people who are raised, we're talking about the universities, right? These are the ones who are raised that you should do what you feel. And you should feel and do what you want to do. Because that's, of course, what your right is. Your rights exist, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. As opposed to the direction that it happened, no, in the end of the day, even though we might be talking about Goyim, we might be talking about necessarily people who are not Jewish or Jewish, doesn't make a difference. In the end of the day, the status or the idea of the ideal right is one that knows there are boundaries. Yes, sometimes we have to say no. Not everything I want to do is not everything I want to do I necessarily can do. And yes, that breeds religion. Yes, it does end up breeding religion, because that is what Judaism has been preaching for the past 3,000 years. A society which enshrines rights is a society which develops takers. A society which focuses on my obligations, or a religion which focuses on my obligation, that is a society that develops givers. That's a society that is an ideal. A child that's raised in an environment which is involved in Torah, or the idea of religious practice, is trained to be conscious of his obligations. A member of such a society, you can rely on him. And you know what? You can rely on him even when no one is watching. He is trustworthy to his word. He's honest to what the truth is. He's real about what needs to be done. I've been privy to many people who have become Bali Tshuva, and I can almost predict it, who's the one who's going to end up doing it. I don't mean this in any offensive way to anyone who's this way or that way, but it's true, and I'm telling you it's a fact. A person who's really, really searching for the truth. A person who's focused on, can I do what's right? What is the right thing to do? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? I logically see the truth in front of my eyes. Is this the next step that I should be doing? This Charlie Kirk himself was keeping one day of the week. He's not Jewish, but he was keeping one day of the week because he saw the beauty that lies behind what we call the Sabbath. But the second we see laws that are absolute, laws that are divine, laws that don't change, then suddenly we appreciate, suddenly we feel free. That is a person who's there. In a democracy, the people make the law. In the Torah, the law makes the people. And you should remember that rule and keep it on your refrigerator, because it's extremely true. In a democracy, the people make the law, and therefore it's relative and changes, and it's dynamic on a constant basis. But in Torah, the law makes the people, because I become a mensch. I became a ben adam. I have limitations. I have a right and a left. I have a decision. Before I make a decision, I have someone above me that's telling me, is it correct what you have to do? And never forget, and always keep it in your mind, because this is a time, I assure you, in a couple, 2-3 months, it will be a blast in the past that will be forgotten. But always remember all these truths that we've had, that not necessarily are we coming from the fact that all men are created equal. Rather, if you want to be a slave to the truth, then the slave to the truth, that is true freedom.